and welcome to Budget with Business Standard. GST may be the star that everyone looks at for indirect taxes, but today's episode goes beyond GST and takes you through the tariffs and duties that add weight to the union budget. There's much more to watch, from disinvestment plans to an enriching interview. Since 2017-18, the budget has stopped being an event for those indirect taxes which have been subsumed by GST. What has been left for the budget are customs tariffs and excise duties on petrol and diesel, besides alcohol used in medicines and other sundry items. This report captures the story of indirect taxes relevant to budget.
Since 2017-18, the union budget has stopped being an event for those indirect taxes which have been subsumed in the goods and services tax. What the budget can still tweak are custom tariffs and excise duties on petrol and diesel, besides alcohol used in medicines and other sundry items. Of these, the government has already been altering excise duty on petrol and diesel outside of the budget. Last year, it introduced Agriculture, Infrastructure and Development cess on these two fuels, but neutralized it by proportionately reducing basic excise duty and special additional excise duty, leaving customers unaffected. So mainly, it is the customs duty which the budget has yet for tweaking, and the government has been doing so ever since the Atmanirbhar Bharat plan was announced, reducing import duties on raw materials and raising it on products which could be made in India. The process is expected to continue in Budget 2022 as well. However, the government is also negotiating free trade agreements with countries and blocs. While duty tweaks there will be for these countries and blocs and may be done outside of the budget, the government may announce some alteration to custom duties on those products for other countries in the budget.
While the union budget per se may not have much to do with GST because the decisions of GST are taken by GST Council when required from time to time, it is expected to provide some directional clarity on what we can expect on GST in the fifth year of GST. The major changes that are expected are in respect of customs duty. On customs duties, we have seen a movement to Atmanirbhar Bharat recently, which may require that the import duties on certain items be tweaked, keeping in mind the interest of the domestic producers. However, we have to be careful enough to ensure that the inputs which are required for domestic manufacturing are not subjected to higher customs duty.
As India negotiates FTAs with countries and regions mentioned earlier, there has been the demand that goods produced in SEZs should also be treated as coming from the countries with which we have these agreements. In other words, there should not be any import duty from goods produced in SEZs and sold in the domestic tariff area.
From 2018 to 2021, numerous SEZ have been denotified because they were not able to get a proper response from the industries. One key area is whereby SEZ is not able to freely sell and market those goods in the mainland of India. If a person has two options, whether he has to import goods from SEZ which will be liable to custom duties, or he has to import such goods from countries like Bhutan and Nepal, Afghanistan, whereby we have a free trade agreements on which there are no import duties, then the person will like to import such goods from these countries. We should ideally give the same status to SEZ which we are given to our FTAs, meaning thereby anything that is produced in SEZ could be brought to the mainland India or domestic tariff area without charge of any customs duty.
Now we go over to a person with strong views on reforming the indirect tax system through GST. Yes, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, former Deputy Chairman of Planning Commission, had said back in 2017 that GST was an extension of the economic reform started in 1991. In a conversation with Arup Roy Choudhury, Mr. Ahluwalia outlines what the budget must do in an abnormal year like this. Listen in.
Dr. Ahluwalia, good evening and welcome to this interview with Business Standard. Sir, we would like to start with your assessment of the current economic situation. There were signs of recovery, and now the third wave has hit, and again there are restrictions across states. So, in your view, how broad-based was the recovery which was happening, and how affected it will be by this latest round of restrictions because of the Omicron wave?
Well, we are going through, all over the world, we're going through a highly uncertain period. So it's very difficult to predict what the current Omicron wave will be like. As has happened in other countries, the peak will be reached very quickly and it'll come down again, in which case it may not be something that will affect the whole of this quarter. The National Statistical Office had assessed that there would be a growth rate of about 9.2%, but this was really based on the first 2 quarters. It doesn't take into account what is the most recent development. It certainly doesn't take into account the Omicron. We can certainly claim that India saw a strong recovery from the very sharp decline the previous year. So I would say that there is a recovery, but the real question is, what's the momentum behind this recovery going forward? To some extent, manufacturing has done better. Industry manufacturing done better than services, and a lot of the informal sector is in the service area.
As per you, what are the 2 to 3 things that the finance minister and the finance secretary and the other secretaries in North Block should keep in mind while preparing the budget?
Issue number one, which people will be looking at, is what is our macroeconomic stance going forward? Forget about what it was in the past. Are we on a sound macroeconomic basis going forward? There's been a lot of speculation on whether the budget will hit the fiscal deficit that was targeted. I personally do not think that's a very important issue, because this is an abnormal year. The expectation was that the GDP will grow at 10.5%. They recently announced 9.2. My guess is that it may well be 8.5, given what has happened on Omicron. The most important thing is, what can we do in the next year which would have a more immediate effect? And in my view, I would say that the lack of demand that everybody complains about is actually because investment has gone down. And I don't think the solution is pumping up consumption demand. The important thing to do would be to have a really strong stimulus on public investment in infrastructure.
Now, do you think just an infra push is enough to create jobs, or does the budget need to announce more initiatives to help job creation, and what can those initiatives be?
Jobs are going to be created by the middle and small scale sector. I think the most important thing the government can do there is to actually make sure that the public sector banking system restarts the credit cycle. And frankly, the growth of credit from the public sector banking system has been very, very low, very subdued. The trend of the last 3 years of raising import duties has been a mistake. I think the government is badly advised on this. In fact, I would be delighted if she would actually make a policy statement on customs duties. What is the government's statement? What is the government's policy on customs duties? Is raising duties viewed as a way of promoting Indian industry, or no? It shouldn't be, in my view. And if you make that clear statement, at least you stop further lobbying. I think it would be great to make a list of items where our duty rates are much above those of Southeast Asia and simply lower them, giving a signal that this is the direction that we want to go.
Dr. Ahluwalia, thank you so much for your time.
Mr. Ahluwalia is clear that the budget must give a realistic assessment of the macroeconomic situation rather than focus too much on fiscal deficit. Interestingly, the next segment is on disinvestment, a subject that Mr. Ahluwalia has been vocal about. This report goes into the targets set for disinvestment and why it's tough to meet those numbers.
The government's bold intent of privatizing PSUs has seen little action on the ground. Although the centre has succeeded in selling Air India after years of trying, it is yet to complete big-ticket privatization of PSUs like BPCL, Shipping Corporation of India, or Concor, announced in 2019. This hasn't stopped the centre from setting ambitious divestment targets, assuming that it would complete privatization of PSUs. It has missed divestment targets in the past 2 years and may have to revise its target yet again this year, as privatization of BPCL is unlikely to be completed. Apart from BPCL, other PSUs in the government's disinvestment pipeline at present are BEML Limited, Shipping Corporation, Neelachal Ispat, Pawan Hans, and Concor. In FY20, the government had targeted Rs 1.05 trillion as disinvestment receipts in budget estimates. That was lowered to Rs 65,000 crore at the revised estimate stage, but the actual collections were just Rs 50,298 crore that year. In FY21, the government had budgeted for divestment proceeds of Rs 2.1 trillion. This was revised to Rs 32,000 crore. The receipts were only a little higher at Rs 32,845 crore. With uncertainty looming yet again due to the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, the centre could miss the target by a wide margin if the public listing of LIC is pushed to next year. LIC is touted to be the biggest public listing the country has seen, and the government's plan to come up with Rs 1 trillion issue may not be a cakewalk. Although investors have been eyeing the issue eagerly, there have been concerns among merchant bankers over the valuation of the insurance behemoth.
It's true that many promises on disinvestment and privatization have fallen by the wayside. But it's the Air India sale to the Tatas that will be remembered more than all the failed targets in yet another pandemic year. Now it's time for a change. That's what the next segment is all about, the many changes in the budget format.
Earlier, the union budget used to be presented at 5 p.m. on the last working day of February, a practice inherited from the British era. The evening presentation of the budget allowed producers and tax collecting agencies to work out the changes overnight. However, while presenting a union budget under the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government in 1999, Yashwant Sinha changed the time to 11 a.m. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley in 2017 went a step ahead by advancing the budget presentation day to 1st February so that parliamentary approval process could be completed before March 31st and government agencies could start implementing programs from the first day of a new financial year on April 1st without any delay. The same year, Jaitley also merged the railway budget with the union budget, ending a 92-year-old colonial practice. The merger gave more elbow room to the Finance Ministry for better allocation of resources. In 2019, Sitharaman ditched the tradition of carrying budget documents in a leather briefcase when she chose the Swadeshi Bahi Khata instead. In 2021, given the COVID situation, government decided not to print voluminous budget documents and instead distribute the papers electronically, even to the members of parliament. For her part, FM Sitharaman read the budget speech from a Made in India tablet. The printing of the budget papers requires staff to be locked up in a basement printing press of North Block for a couple of weeks. This year may be no different. However, the halwa ceremony tradition, which marks the beginning of the printing of the budget documents, may continue like last year while strictly following the COVID protocol.
The legendary briefcase that a finance minister earlier carried on the budget day has already been given a go-by. What next? We leave you with that thought till we meet again on Saturday with lots more of budget news and views.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.